He didn't belong there, or so they told themselves every time they glanced his way, the only black face in a sea of practiced smiles and tailored arrogance, a silent rebuke to their unspoken rules. They laughed too easily at each other's jokes, but stiffened when he cleared his throat, praised each other's sloppy shortcuts while dissecting his precision as overcomplicated, convinced that their old boys club charm would carry them through anything, even betrayal. What they never imagined was that the man they dismissed, the one they labeled difficult and aggressive, had the leverage to unmake them with a single word. This isn't just a story about boardroom politics or office drama. It's about the price of blind entitlement, the cost of ignoring the one voice that could have saved them. Stay tuned, hit like and subscribe if you want the full truth, and let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what would you have done in his place? Darius Cole walked into the sleek glass conference room, the Manhattan skyline glowing behind the floor-to-ceiling windows like an audience of silent judges. He could feel the hush as he set his leather binder on the polished table, the reflection of his serious face wavering on the glossy surface. He straightened his tailored suit jacket, ignoring the flicker of amusement on Brad Whitmore's face at the far end. Brad was sprawled in his chair with the easy arrogance of a man who believed every room was his by birthright, arms folded over his expensive suit, smirk practically carved into his face. Jenna Keller sat near him, scrolling on her tablet, immaculate in her white blazer and gold jewelry, offering not even the courtesy of looking up. The rest of the team was a wall of blank, polite corporate faces, watching like they didn't want to get involved. Darius cleared his throat and let his voice cut through the silence with careful precision. Thank you all for staying late. I want to present our new market strategy proposal. It's a detailed data-backed plan to increase market share 22% over the next fiscal year by segmenting our customers into 3 clusters and customizing outreach for each one. He paused, clicking the remote to advance the slide deck projected on the far wall. The charts lit up, crisp and professional. If you look at slide 14, you'll see our risk distribution model. This isn't a gamble. The coefficients are designed to spread exposure while maximizing targeted growth opportunities. He knew he was being thorough. He knew the research was solid. But Brad snorted, loud enough to interrupt, leaning forward with a wide, fake-friendly smile. Hold on, Darius, buddy, slow down a second. Not everyone here has your academic background. Investors don't want to hear about coefficients and clusters. They want something they can understand in 10 words or less. The words dripped with condescension, and a few people laughed quietly. Darius felt his fingers tighten around the remote, but he forced a steady breath. Brad, these aren't just buzzwords. This is our credibility. Investors want rigor. This isn't some napkin sketch. It's a professional plan built on hard data. Brad didn't even look at the slide. He turned to the room theatrically. What he's saying is, don't put all our eggs in one basket. That clear enough for everyone. The laughter was louder now. Darius swallowed his irritation, fighting the rising heat in his neck. He was not going to let them see him lose it. Oversimplifying it that way is misleading, he said, his voice even, though his jaw was tight. This plan shows a clear path for diversification and scale. Brad just shrugged like he was the only reasonable man in the room. Sure, but maybe don't bore them to death. A few more snickers. Darius shifted to the next slide without waiting. Here's the client segmentation model. 3 demographic clusters tailored to buying behavior. This isn't shotgun marketing. We're talking about precision targeting that will increase ROI while lowering CAC over time. Jenna finally looked up, blinking with feigned confusion. She put on that thin, practiced smile that made his stomach turn. Darius, she said, voice soft but slicing. I don't want to be rude, but you're coming off a little aggressive right now. Silence fell like a dropped stone. Darius blinked once. He forced his expression to remain blank. He knew exactly how that would look. He closed the email without replying. Instead, he stood and straightened his jacket, walking down the hall with measured, deliberate steps. When he reached Jenna's office, he knocked once, then entered without waiting. Jenna was there with Brad, both of them leaning over her computer screen. They looked up in practiced surprise. "Oh, Darius." "Morning," Jenna chirped, that bright white smile like a dagger. Brad smirked, lifting his coffee mug. "What's up, Chief?" Darius closed the door behind him. He kept his voice level. "I saw your email. There was no vote yesterday. You sent that out like it was decided." Jenna's eyes went wide, full of fake innocence. "Oh, we all agreed it needed major reworking." Brad offered to simplify it. "I thought that was clear." Darius felt heat in his chest, but he didn't let it show. "That's not the same as agreeing he'd lead it. I'm the CEO. It's my strategy." Brad raised his eyebrows, grinning like he'd already won. "Hey man, don't be so sensitive. It's a team effort. You seemed upset yesterday. We figured you'd want a break. Don't want you burning out." Darius's jaw tightened. "You can't unilaterally reassign ownership." Jenna's smile slipped for just a second, her eyes narrowing. "Darius, let's not make this a thing. You're overreacting. It's not about ownership. It's about getting the work done." Brad nodded like a helpful friend. "Yeah, don't get all territorial. We're all on the same side here." Darius felt the pulse in his temple. He breathed in slowly, then out. "Don't do that. Don't act like I'm unreasonable for objecting to you misrepresenting what happened." Jenna rolled her eyes and sighed theatrically. "God, Darius, this is what I'm talking about. You get so intense. It's intimidating. People feel like they can't speak freely." He stared at her. He wanted to yell. He wanted to tear the pretense off her face. But he didn't. Instead, he turned without a word and walked out, letting the door close behind him with a soft click. He stood in the hallway for a moment, the hum of voices and distant ringing phones buzzing in his ears like static. He breathed once, twice, forcing his hands to relax at his sides. He wouldn't give them the meltdown they were baiting him into. Not today. Not ever. He went back to his office, sat down, and pulled up the project files. He'd send them to legal. He'd challenge the misrepresentation formally. He wasn't going to let them erase him. But as he started drafting the email, a new message popped in. From Brad. Subject line, revised strategy draft. He clicked it open and felt his heart hammer in his chest. It was his plan. Almost word for word. The same risk model. The same segmentation strategy. The same forecast projections. Except the header read, authored by Brad Whitmore, Senior VP, Strategy Lead. He felt cold all over. He scrolled, looking for his name. It wasn't there. Brad had stripped it out entirely. He'd just taken it. As if Darius hadn't spent weeks building it from scratch. As if he didn't even exist. His phone buzzed on the desk. A text from a junior analyst. "Hey, congrats on the strategy getting approved. Brad's revisions look great." He dropped the phone like it was hot. He pressed his palms to his eyes and let out a shuddering breath. He felt humiliation burn in his chest like acid. He sat back and stared at the screen. It wasn't just personal sabotage. Brad wore his usual smirk, an expensive charcoal suit cut to accentuate the breadth of his shoulders, and a casual arrogance that had the receptionist fawning over him before she even glanced at Darius. Jenna wasn't here in person, but she texted Brad that morning with some last-minute talking points, ones Darius hadn't seen and hadn't approved, and Brad had chuckled as he read them, refusing to share. Darius ignored it. He wouldn't let them get in his head. This was his pitch, his plan, his moment. As they took the elevator up to the executive conference suite, Brad nudged him with an elbow, voice low and conspiratorial. "Just remember to keep it light." "Huh? No one wants a dissertation." Darius didn't even turn to look at him. "They want rigor. They're managing pension funds, Brad." Brad let out an exaggerated sigh. "Man, you really don't get people, do you?" The elevator chimed. Darius stepped out first. Inside the boardroom, the partners were waiting. 6 of them, all in expensive suits, all with skeptical eyes and politely guarded expressions. They shook hands, muttered pleasantries, and took their seats. Darius opened his binder, pulled up the presentation on the wall display, and began. His voice was calm, confident, precise. He had practiced every sentence, every pause. He laid out the segmentation plan with clarity, showed the forecast numbers, explained the risk models in plain English, without insulting their intelligence. He could see the partners leaning forward, nodding. They were listening. They were buying in. And then Brad stood up. Darius didn't even see it at first, focused as he was on answering a detailed question about the Southeast region projections. But Brad was already stepping in front of him, physically blocking him from the screen with that fake friendly salesman grin. Whoa, let's not drown in charts, people," Brad said, laughing as though they were all in on the joke together. He placed a condescending hand on Darius's shoulder like he was a well-meaning uncle dealing with an overeager kid. What Darius is trying to say is we're going to be smart. No wasted spend. We're laser-focused. That's it. That's the pitch. Right. Darius's mouth opened, shock freezing his voice. The partners glanced at each other. One let out an uncomfortable chuckle. Another frowned, clearly wanting to hear more detail. Darius tried to step forward again, but Brad kept talking over him. "You don't need all that academic junk," Brad said breezily. "Just know we'll hit your targets and make you look like geniuses. That's what matters." He ended with a broad grin, arms spread wide like he'd just performed a magic trick. Darius felt heat crawling up his neck. He clenched his binder in one hand so tightly his knuckles went white. He tried again to speak, "If I may," but Brad was already thanking the partners for their time and ushering them toward the door with false warmth. "We'll follow up with a concise doc you can actually read without falling asleep, promise." The partners gave thin smiles, a couple nodding politely, but the energy had shifted. Where there had been real interest, now there was vague dismissal, polite but final. Darius knew what it meant. He'd seen it in too many boardrooms before. He watched helplessly as they filed out. One partner offered a muted, "Thanks, Darius," but didn't meet his eyes. The door shut. The room fell silent except for the hum of the projector cooling down. Brad finally turned to him, still grinning. "Relax, man. I saved your ass in there. You were losing them." Darius didn't move. He just stared at Brad, chest heaving. He forced the words through clenched teeth. "You humiliated me in front of them." Brad's grin slipped for a moment. Then it returned, colder this time. "You embarrassed yourself. I just made sure they didn't walk out halfway through." He patted Darius's arm like you'd calm a dog. "Don't overthink it." Darius felt something crack inside him. He didn't speak again. He simply turned, gathered his binder with shaking hands, and walked out of the room. He could hear Brad behind him, chuckling softly. He knew how that would go. He knew exactly what they'd say, that it was a misunderstanding, that he was overreacting, that he was reading too much into things. He walked through the office doors at 7:30 a.m., deliberately early to avoid the morning crowd. He needed time to breathe, to plan, to figure out how he could salvage his leadership before Jenna and Brad finished poisoning every will he had. He sat at his desk, booted his computer, and began combing through the schedule. That's when he saw it. Strategy Revision Session 8 a.m. Conference Room B. He stared at the line on the screen for a full 10 seconds before realization settled cold in his gut. He hadn't been invited. He scrolled back through his emails twice, then 3 times, searching for any mention of it. Nothing. He checked his spam. Nothing. He felt the heat flush his face as he pushed back from the desk and stood, breathing hard. They hadn't even bothered to hide it. They were meeting about his strategy. The plan he had written, the one Brad had stolen, the one Jenna had whitewashed him out of. And they hadn't even invited him. He checked the clock. 7:55. He could still make it. He grabbed his binder and strode out of his office, ignoring the assistants who tried to say good morning, ignoring the pulse hammering at his temple. He arrived at conference room B just as the door was closing. He pushed it open without knocking. The room went silent. Brad was at the head of the table, marker in hand, gesturing at a whiteboard already filled with bullet points. Jenna sat beside him, one leg elegantly crossed over the other, her tablet balanced in her lap. Around the table were the senior analysts, the marketing leads, and the CFO, all watching Darius with a mix of discomfort and curiosity. Brad's eyes widened, and then his grin spread. "Well, look who decided to join us." Darius ignored him, planting his binder on the table with a controlled thump. "I didn't receive an invitation." Jenna's brows lifted, all faux surprise. Really? Oh God, that's so weird. Must have been a glitch. We sent it to everyone. She didn't even bother to sound convincing. Brad clucked his tongue. Technical hiccups, huh? Classic IT. He chuckled. Anyway, you're here now. We were just hashing things out. Darius let his eyes move around the table, seeing the way people shifted under his gaze, some refusing to meet his eyes at all. He saw his own slides on the projector, his words rewritten in Brad's voice, his structure hacked into sound bites. He felt something inside him go ice cold. He opened his binder, flipping to the original plan. We should be using the segmentation model I designed, he said, voice low but firm. Brad shook his head with exaggerated patience. Darius, man, we appreciate the work you did. Really. But it was too, let's say, academic. Investors don't want that. We're going for something cleaner. Jenna added with her usual silky tone, we're just trying to make sure it's accessible. You have to know your audience. Darius slammed the binder shut, so hard the sound made people flinch. He leveled his gaze at Jenna, then Brad. Don't patronize me. I know exactly what this is. You're cutting me out of my own work. Brad's smirk vanished. His eyes hardened. Hey, if you're going to get defensive, maybe you should step out. We're trying to get work done. Darius exhaled slowly, forcing himself not to rise to the bait. He looked at the analysts around the table, watching their uncomfortable faces. You all know whose plan this was. Don't pretend you don't. Silence. No one met his eyes. Brad clapped his hands once. Okay, let's keep this professional. Darius, you're welcome to stay if you can keep it civil. Otherwise, let's not waste everyone's time. Jenna's lips curved into that cold, triumphant smile. Darius felt his pulse spike, but he forced his hands to stay at his sides. He didn't speak, didn't give them the meltdown they wanted. He turned on his heel and left the room, closing the door behind him so quietly the latch was the only sound. As he walked back to his office, his legs felt heavy, as if gravity itself was conspiring to drag him down. He shut his door behind him and pressed his forehead to the cool glass window that overlooked the city. The silence in his office was deafening. That night, he went home exhausted, too wired to sleep but too tired to do anything. He sat on his worn leather couch with a whiskey in his hand, the ice clinking as he turned over every moment of the day in his head. He thought about that meeting, about the silence from the team he'd mentored, the way they all looked at the table instead of meeting his gaze. He thought about how Brad had positioned himself as the calm, reasonable leader, while Darius was painted as volatile. The next evening, he got a text from Marcus, one of the few senior analysts he still trusted. Come out tonight. Everyone's at Howler's. Against his better judgment, Darius went. He told himself he needed to show up, to remind people he was still in charge. Howler's was a sleek cocktail bar near the office, full of dark wood and low lighting. When he arrived, he saw them immediately. Brad holding court at the corner table, Jenna sipping a martini with a sharp smile, a circle of managers and analysts laughing at something Brad had just said. They weren't trying to challenge his ideas. They were trying to remove him entirely. He came in early the next day, suit perfectly pressed, tie knotted with precision, his face set like granite. He would not back down. He would not be erased. He spent the morning rewriting the strategy deck, inserting notes and data that Brad could never explain on his own. He planned to confront them head-on. No more quiet tolerance. No more ignoring the whispers. When the office filled, he waited, biding his time. He saw Brad laughing in the break room, Jenna perched on the counter, sipping her latte, both of them surrounded by a small crowd. The corporate court in session. He didn't bother to be subtle. He walked in, cleared his throat, and watched the group fall silent. Brad turned, eyebrows raised. Darius. Morning. Darius ignored the greeting. We need to talk. Now. Brad's eyes flickered to the watching crowd. He smiled slowly, mockingly. Sure, boss. Lead the way. Darius turned and strode out, hearing Brad's steps behind him. He didn't speak until they were inside his office with the door closed. Then he turned, voice low and vibrating with anger. He refused to let spill over. You excluded me from my own meeting. You rewrote my plan. You humiliated me in front of our biggest client. And now you're spreading rumors I'm unstable. I want to know exactly what your endgame is." Brad's smile faded. He dropped the friendly act, leaning back against the door with his arms folded. "Jesus, Darius, you really don't get it, do you?" Darius's eyes narrowed. "Explain it to me." Brad sighed, pushed himself off the door, and stepped closer. His voice dropped to an intimate, mocking hush. "You don't belong here. Not really. You think because you have the title you can change the culture? Make these people follow you? They're never going to buy in. They don't trust you. They don't even like you." Darius felt the words hit like a punch. He held his ground. Brad smiled shark-like. "You'll never get real support here. Best to know your place. Maybe if you learn to play ball, let people who know how to sell do the talking, you can keep your seat at the table. Otherwise..." He shrugged, stepping back, letting the threat hang in the air. Darius's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "Get out." Brad tilted his head. "Carrefour, man. That tempers what everyone's talking about." Darius's voice was a knife. "Get out." Brad left without another word, pulling the door shut behind him with infuriating calm. Darius stood there for a long moment, fists trembling at his sides, breathing like a man trying not to drown. He forced himself to calm down, to plan. He would call an all-hands meeting. He'd explain the truth, show the real numbers. He sent out the invite before he could talk himself out of it. He wrote and rewrote his notes, determined to lay it all out clearly, professionally, unassailably. He refused to let them turn him into the angry stereotype they wanted. At 2 p.m., the team gathered in the main conference room. Darius stood at the head of a table, flipping through the slides one last time as people filed in. He saw Brad lean against the wall, arms folded, expression lazy and amused. Jenna sat at the far end, legs crossed, tapping at her tablet, refusing to look at him. He began. He spoke clearly, calmly, laying out the plan, the segmentation strategy, the risk modeling, the forecasts. He made sure to be measured, polite, professional. But the room felt like a tomb. People wouldn't meet his eyes. He pressed on, showing the numbers Brad had butchered in his version. He demonstrated exactly how the client pitch had been destroyed by oversimplification. And still silence. Finally, Jenna raised a hand with studied patience. "Darius, we appreciate the work you put in, but honestly, it's not what our clients want." Brad snickered, and someone else laughed quietly. Darius felt heat crawling up his neck. He forced the words through tight lips. "You're wrong. The data supports this approach. I'm not going to stand here and watch you kill the company's best opportunity out of laziness." Brad pushed off the wall, strolling forward with exaggerated calm. "See? This is what I'm talking about. You're making it personal. You're making people uncomfortable." Darius's vision tunneled. "I'm making people uncomfortable? By doing my job." Brad spread his arms wide. "We had to make a choice, man. The board wants something simple, something they can sell. They chose me to lead it." Darius's heart went cold. "What did you say?" Brad looked at him with mock sympathy. "Didn't you check your email? It went out an hour ago. All hands announcement. I'm the new strategy lead. You're off the project." Darius felt the room tilt around him. He grabbed his phone, thumb shaking as he opened the inbox. There it was, from Jenna, announcing new leadership for strategy revision. Brad Whitmore will be taking point on all client-facing materials going forward. He looked up at the room, saw the averted eyes, the fake neutrality. Betrayal so complete it made him dizzy. Jenna smiled at him, tight and professional. "We need someone the clients feel comfortable with. That's all." Brad clapped him on the shoulder, leaning in close so only he could hear. "It's just business, Darius. Don't take it so hard." He jerked away. Silence fell. Everyone watched, waiting, wanting to see what he'd do. He could feel it like a weight on his chest. The trap was set. If he yelled, they'd call him angry and unstable. If he stayed silent, they'd see it as acceptance. He forced himself to straighten, to smooth his tie with fingers that felt like claws. His voice cracked once before he got it under control. I see. He closed his laptop with deliberate care. He didn't look at Brad or Jenna again. He didn't look at the faces turned away from him, too cowardly to meet his eyes. He walked out without another word, back straight, heart thundering like a drum of war. And now they were going to stand in front of the most important investors the company had: pension fund managers, institutional buyers, board members, and sell it as their own. He closed the document carefully. He smoothed his tie in the reflection of his darkened monitor. Then he stood, gathered his notes, and walked out the door. He would not let them erase him. The elevator ride to the top-floor conference suite felt endless, the soft corporate music hissing in his ears like static. When the doors slid open, the lobby was already full of investors in dark suits, sipping coffee, chatting politely. Jenna was there greeting them, smile perfect, makeup immaculate, her tablet at her side. Brad stood near the door to the main hall, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, his teeth white and predatory. Darius walked past them without slowing. He heard Jenna's voice, pitched to be overheard. "Oh, look who finally decided to show up." He ignored her. He pushed through the doors into the hall. The room was massive, a wall of windows looking out over the city, a long table at the front for the panelists, rows of chairs filled with suits, name tags clipped to expensive fabrics. The presentation screen was already up, displaying the opening slide in a sanitized font. Future strategy, a new vision. No mention of him. He walked to the front, dropped his binder on the table with a heavy thud, and began setting up his notes. People were watching, whispering. He didn't care. He had the right to speak. It was his plan. Brad entered with Jenna at his side. He saw Darius there, and his smile froze for a second before returning in full, oily force. He leaned over, voice low. "What do you think you're doing?" Darius didn't look at him. "I'm presenting my strategy." Brad snorted, loud enough for a few nearby investors to hear. "Your strategy? Man, read the room. They don't want you up there. Don't embarrass yourself." Darius's voice was ice. "I'm not leaving." Brad opened his mouth, but Jenna's hand was already on his arm. She whispered something too low for Darius to catch, but her eyes never left his face. She smiled with that cold corporate sweetness he'd come to despise. Then she turned to the audience. "Let's get started, everyone. Please take your seats." They did. The hush fell. The lights dimmed. The projector flickered. Jenna walked to the podium and began the introduction, her voice honey smooth. "Thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to share our vision for the future. Today, Brad Whitmore, our Senior Vice President, will lead us through the new strategy that's going to position us for record-breaking growth." Darius's hands clenched around his notes, so hard the pages crumpled. She hadn't even looked at him. Not once. Then Brad stepped forward, casual and commanding, flashing his easy grin. "Thanks, Jenna. I know everyone's eager to see how we're going to make the money, so I'll keep it simple." He hit the clicker, and Darius watched in horror as his slides appeared on the screen, altered just enough to hide the complexity, butchered into slogans. His models stripped of nuance. His forecasts turned into wild promises. Darius felt his heart pound. He glanced at the audience. Heads nodding, pens scribbling, eyes bright with greed at the projected numbers. Lies. They were selling lies. He waited, pulse thundering in his ears as Brad droned on. And then he couldn't take it anymore. When Brad paused for breath, Darius stepped forward. His voice shook only slightly. "Excuse me, I need to clarify something." The room fell dead silent. Brad's head snapped around, eyes wide with surprise that curdled instantly into fury. Jenna sat up straighter, her smile gone. Darius turned to the audience, forcing calm into every syllable. "What you're seeing isn't the full plan. These projections depend on targeted segmentation and risk modeling that's been removed from this version. Without them, the numbers you're seeing are." As he reached the end of the hallway, he didn't pause to look back. He didn't need to. He knew exactly what they were doing behind that door. They were selling his vision, his work, to the investors who would never know his name, would never see his fingerprints on the future they were buying. It was the final act in their slow, methodical theft of everything he'd built. And they expected him to vanish quietly, to sulk and accept his exile. He let out a breath, slow and controlled, and straightened his tie one last time. He turned the corner and walked down another empty hall toward the private offices reserved for board members and VIP guests. The lighting here was dimmer, quieter. He relished the silence. When he reached the window at the end of the hall, he stopped and pulled his phone from his pocket. For a moment, his thumb hovered over the screen. He thought about the night he sat up building the original strategy deck alone at his kitchen table. He remembered the taste of burnt coffee and the ache in his shoulders, the pride he'd felt when he finally cracked the segmentation model. He remembered thinking, finally, I'll prove to them I belong here. He let the bitterness of that memory settle in his chest like lead. Then he opened his contacts. His finger scrolled to a name he hadn't used in a long time but had never deleted. It rang twice before she answered. Her voice was clipped, efficient, but with a note of curiosity. Darius, haven't heard from you in a while. What's going on? He didn't waste time. He didn't clear his throat or apologize or hesitate. He spoke like a man who was finished with apologies forever. Pull it. Effective immediately. A silence fell so heavy he could almost hear her blink on the other end. Then she spoke, cautious but intrigued. Excuse me. He didn't repeat himself. He just let the silence stretch until she understood. When she spoke again, her tone was lower. Serious. This isn't a bluff, is it? Darius's grip tightened around the phone. His voice was flat. No. I'm done. Every project, every cent Redwood Capital is pulling out. He heard the faint tapping of her keyboard as she no doubt pulled up the files. He pictured her eyes scanning the commitments, the timelines, the promises made to the board, all backed by Redwood's deep pockets. He imagined her calculating the fallout in real time. Finally, she spoke, voice unreadable. Tell me why. Not because I need it, I can guess, but because I want to hear you say it. He closed his eyes, letting the truth pour out in the same even tone. They stole my work. They humiliated me publicly. They made it clear they don't want me here. So I'm making sure they know exactly what that costs. He heard her exhale, a thoughtful sound. Then her voice firmed. Consider it done. He opened his eyes, staring at the reflection of himself in the darkened glass of the window. For the first time in days, his hands felt steady. Lena continued, her voice pragmatic and cool. I'll have legal draft the withdrawal notice by end of day. I'll call the other partners and let them know Redwood's done backing them. You know what this is going to do, right? He nodded, though she couldn't see it. They'll lose everything. Good. Her voice was crisp, approving. I always liked you, Darius. I hated how they talked to you in those early meetings. Should have burned them down sooner. Stay in touch. He ended the call without saying goodbye. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and rested both hands against the cool glass, breathing deeply. The city sprawled beneath him in all its indifferent beauty. He felt something uncoil in his chest. Not triumph, not relief, just a calm, lethal clarity. But that applause was still echoing in the room when Redwood Capital's legal team began their work, typing emails and placing calls with a ruthlessness that matched Darius's mood. He walked through the gleaming glass doors of the lobby into the biting autumn air without breaking stride, the wind cutting across his face and clearing the last traces of heat from his blood. He felt weightless, hollowed out, but in a way that felt clean. He had spent so long swallowing his anger, pressing it down so deep it threatened to poison him from the inside. Now it was gone. In its place was clarity, purpose. Inside the shareholder room, the air was very different. Brad had just wrapped up the presentation to enthusiastic applause, shaking hands with big investors and slapping the backs of board members like they were old fraternity buddies. Jenna was beside him, answering questions with practiced charm, flicking her sleek hair over her shoulder, every inch the smiling, reasonable executive. Brad was basking in it, eyes gleaming at the promise of bonuses and promotions, imagining the headlines praising his vision. He had just leaned in to whisper to Jenna, nailed it, when the first vibration hit his pocket. He ignored it at first. Investors were still lined up to shake his hand. But then Jenna's phone buzzed on the table beside her tablet. She glanced at it and her brow furrowed. Another buzz. Another. Brad felt his own phone vibrate again. And again. He forced another grin at an investor, but there was an edge of distraction now. His palm was sweaty around the handshake. "Excuse me, one SEC," he muttered, ducking away toward the corner of the room, Jenna following with a look that had lost some of its polish. Brad yanked out his phone and read the top email subject line, "Redwood Capital withdrawal notification." His mouth went dry. He thumbed it open, scanning the cold legal language. Effective immediately. Funding terminated. No further disbursements. Project commitments null and void pending renegotiation. He felt a chill sweat break across his scalp. Jenna was reading her own screen with wide eyes. What the hell is this? Brad didn't answer. His phone lit up with another call, this time from the project manager overseeing the largest construction initiative they had on the books. He ignored it. Another buzz. Another call. His email kept updating. A growing list of panic subject lines. Suspension notice. Funding emergency. Redwood termination. He heard Jenna curse under her breath, something she never did in public. Around them, the investors began noticing. Conversations died. Heads turned. A board member approached with a forced smile gone tight at the edges. "Brad, Jenna, can I speak to you for a moment?" They followed him numbly toward the side of the room. More board members were gathering there, looking at their phones. One older director was pale, muttering about Redwood's lawyers. Another held up his screen to Jenna's face, eyes blazing. "Is this real? Is Redwood actually pulling out?" Jenna tried to answer, voice cracking. I don't know. We haven't heard." Brad shoved his phone at her. "Read it." She scanned it, eyes darting, face draining of color. One of the board members spoke with icy calm that was more terrifying than yelling. "This kills half our pipeline. Do you understand that?" Brad tried to bluster, voice high and strained. "Look, this is probably just a misunderstanding. Redwood wouldn't pull out like this without a meeting. The chairman cut him off. He was an old man, but still carried the room with sheer force of presence. His voice dropped to a lethal hush. "Brad, who do you know at Redwood? Who signed this funding? Who controls it?" Brad opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His brain screamed at him to think, to spin, to lie, but he couldn't. He remembered too late the early meetings he'd barely paid attention to. He remembered rolling his eyes while Darius negotiated with Redwood, while Darius talked strategy with Lena Martinez. He remembered scoffing, "Let him talk to the finance people. Who cares?" Jenna's voice came out as a strangled whisper. "Darius." The chairman's head snapped toward her. "What?" Brad swallowed. His voice was a croak. "Darius Cole. He had the relationship. He did the deal." The silence was suffocating. Another director spoke, voice dripping contempt. "So you cut out the only person Redwood actually trusted." Jenna shook her head, hair swinging wildly. He was being difficult. He wasn't a team player. He was going to cost us the deal. The chairman turned slowly to Brad. Is that what he was doing? Costing us? Or protecting us? Brad's mouth opened and closed, soundless. One of the investors, who had sat through the whole presentation nodding and smiling minutes earlier, stepped closer, voice cold and precise. "Is this your idea of leadership? Cutting out the one executive who could actually deliver the funding?" Jenna tried to recover, voice going brittle. "We can fix this. We'll talk to Redwood." The chairman's glare shut her up instantly. "No, you won't. They won't take your calls. They won't answer your emails. You burned the bridge. Permanently." Meanwhile, across the floor in the executive suite, the boardroom had become a war zone. The long polished table was littered with scattered papers, spilled coffee, glowing tablets showing real-time stock charts in freefall. Brad sat at the far end of the table with his tie askew, eyes bloodshot, fingers tapping erratically on the armrest as he tried to think of something, anything, to say. But there was nothing that would fix this. Jenna was seated a few chairs down, arms folded tightly across her chest. nails digging into her sleeves, eyes darting between the angry faces of board members who had stopped pretending to be polite hours ago. At the head of table sat the chairman, gray-haired, hawk-eyed, his hands steepled in front of him, voice cutting through the chaos like a scalpel. "Let me make sure I understand. You unilaterally removed the only person in this company Redwood Capital trusted to lead the strategy. You excluded him from meetings. You took credit for his work. And you humiliated him in front of investors and the entire executive team. Is that correct?" Brad swallowed. His voice cracked. "Look, it wasn't like that. He was being difficult." "Answer the question," the chairman snapped. Brad's jaw worked, but nothing came out. Jenna leaned forward, voice trembling with forced calm. "We thought he was going to tank the deal. He was too aggressive. He wouldn't compromise. We had to show we were in control." The chairman's lip curled. "In control? Your control just cost us our largest funding partner. Redwood isn't just pulling their new investment. They're pulling their existing commitments. Every single project they were funding is now suspended. Every vendor is screaming breach of contract. Our valuation has dropped 15% in a single morning. We're on the verge of defaulting on payroll. The press is outside already. So tell me again how you were in control." Silence. A board member slammed a folder shut. "I just got off the phone with Redwood's legal team. They're not negotiating. They're gone. For good." Another snarled, voice rising. "You think any other firm is going to touch us after this? You think we're going to convince pension funds, municipal contracts, any institutional money to trust us? We're toxic now." Brad's fingers twitched. His eyes glistened. "We can fix this. We can talk to Darius. He'll calm down if we— Darius doesn't work for you anymore." The chairman interrupted coldly. Brad flinched. Jenna tried to recover, voice sickly sweet, desperate. "We can manage the narrative. We'll put out a statement, say it was a miscommunication." A senior board member cut her off with a bark of laughter. "A miscommunication?" Redwood's managing partner personally confirmed they're pulling because of how Darius was treated. This is public. It's already hitting the wires. Every investor we have is going to see that our leadership is incompetent and unethical. Our stock is in freefall." The chairman turned his gaze on Brad like a laser. "You've demonstrated catastrophic judgment. You've cost this company billions. You're fired. Effective immediately." Brad jolted in his seat, mouth opening in protest. "Wait, hold on. You can't." "I just did," the chairman said. He didn't even raise his voice. Security was already at the door. Brad went pale. He looked at Jenna, eyes wide. She wouldn't meet his gaze. He turned back to the table, voice cracking. "This is bullshit. He set us up. Darius set us up." The chairman's voice was ice. "No. You set yourself up when you decided you didn't need him. Get out." Months had passed since Redwood Capital's withdrawal had shattered the company like glass dropped onto concrete, the noise of its collapse reverberating through the industry and sending shockwaves through every partner, supplier, and investor who'd once believed in its promise. The headlines had been brutal and thorough, dissecting every misstep, every arrogant assumption that had led to the company's downfall. And Darius Cole's name had become something whispered with a strange mix of awe and fear in corporate circles. Redwood didn't just cut their funding. They made it clear in public statements that they did so as a matter of principle, that they would not do business with an organization that treated their partners with disdain and dishonesty. Investors fled like rats from a sinking ship, leaving the board scrambling to hold anything together as stock prices cratered and layoffs gutted departments that had once been bloated with smug confidence. In the weeks that followed the catastrophe, Brad's name became synonymous with professional suicide. He had been escorted from the building by security while his former colleagues watched, eyes wide and silent. No other company would touch him, not even for the lower-level sales jobs he once joked he could do in his sleep. His network, built on backslaps and martinis, evaporated. One by one, the men who used to toast him at rooftop bars stopped returning calls, stopped answering emails, leaving him alone with nothing but the echo of his own ego. Jenna fared little better. After the recordings of her gossip about Darius's aggression and instability went viral internally, no respectable company wanted to risk bringing her on. The board's public apology had included specific reference to her behavior, citing it as an example of the toxic culture they were desperate to cleanse. Her carefully curated reputation as the consummate professional was destroyed overnight. She went through 3 months of frantic applications, increasingly desperate interviews, and humiliating rejections, before realizing she wasn't going to be welcomed back into the old world she'd once ruled so confidently. Meanwhile, Darius didn't come back to that company. Not after they offered him apologies and settlements behind closed doors. He didn't want hush money or a token board seat handed out in panicked repentance. Instead, he took time for himself. He spent weeks walking the streets of the city with no plan but to breathe again, to reclaim space that wasn't defined by other people's insecurities or expectations. He sat in small cafes in Harlem with old friends who didn't care about his title or his salary, listening to their stories and remembering who he was before all the suits and meetings tried to squeeze the life out of him. He met with young professionals who wanted to know how he did it, who asked him for advice with eyes shining with the same hunger he'd once felt, and he told them the truth, every ugly, necessary piece of it. Then he started getting calls. Universities, nonprofits, industry groups. They wanted him to speak, not about risk modeling or segmentation strategies, but about what had happened, about how a boardroom full of smart people could be so blind to their own prejudice that they'd sabotage their own company rather than listen to the black man they'd pay to save them. He accepted the invitations, not all at once, but one by one. He spoke in packed auditoriums, in panel discussions broadcast online, in private boardrooms where the silence was thick with discomfort, as he laid out the facts of what happened. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't rage either. He spoke with that same calm, precise clarity they once claimed was too aggressive. And they listened. It was at one of those panels, a diversity and leadership forum held in the big conference center downtown, hosted by an alliance of top firms desperate to avoid becoming the next cautionary headline, that Brad showed up. He didn't sneak in the back or try to hide. He sat in the second row, hair shorter than before, suit cheaper but clean, face pinched with nerves he couldn't quite hide. Darius saw him immediately but didn't react. He delivered his opening remarks with the same even tone, describing not just the Redwood debacle, but the little things that had led there, the coded language, the jokes at bars, the oversights in invites, the insidious narrative that a black executive couldn't be both passionate and professional without being labeled a threat. The room was silent except for the rustle of note-taking and the occasional cough. When the Q&A began, Brad stood slowly. His voice cracked when he introduced himself. I was one of the people who did this to Darius, he said, and there was a collective intake of breath from the audience. He didn't look at them. He looked at Darius. I thought I was being realistic. I thought I was protecting the company. I told myself he was too aggressive, too stubborn. I told myself I was the one who could sell the vision better. But the truth is I didn't want to share the credit. I didn't want to listen, and I didn't see him as my equal. His voice failed for a moment. He swallowed. I lost everything, and I deserved to. The silence was crushing. Darius didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Thank you for saying it, he said. That's where change starts. No applause. Just that heavy, meaningful quiet. Jenna wasn't there that day, but she'd begun her own reckoning. She'd moved back to her hometown, the polished apartment in the city, gone along with her last illusions of invulnerability. She'd taken a job with a nonprofit that trained companies on inclusive leadership. At first, it was the only place that would hire her. But over time, she found that it mattered to her in a way her old job never had. She spoke at workshops about what she'd done, owning it completely. She told rooms full of skeptical managers about the slow poison of coded language and just joking slights about how easy it was to destroy someone's career without ever raising your voice. She didn't spare herself in the telling. She showed them her own emails, her own words. She made them squirm, and she made them listen. One day she stood in front of a room of young interns and said, I helped ruin a good man's career, because I thought I was better, because I thought he was dangerous for pushing too hard, because I didn't want to share my space. Don't be like me. Don't be so sure you're the good one. And they did listen. And far away in another city, Darius got an email from her. Just 2 lines. I'm sorry. Truly. I'm trying to do better. He didn't reply right away. He sat with it for a long time, thinking of everything they'd lost, everything they'd forced him to sacrifice. But eventually he did reply. Thank you. Keep trying. Because forgiveness wasn't about letting them off the hook. It was about letting himself heal, about proving once and for all that their cruelty wouldn't define him forever. The end. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more gripping, thought-provoking narratives about justice, power, and redemption, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'd love to know what you think about this plot. Did the ending resonate with you? Was there a moment that hit you hardest? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And tell me, where are you watching or reading from today? Share your city or country below so we can see how far this story travels. Let's talk about it. Your feedback and ideas help shape the next story we tell together.